Justice Bowman, I wanted to ask you about the issue of contemporaneous documentation. Do you believe that at the audit level, do you believe that contemporaneous documentation should be the basis for determining eligibility, or do you believe that the requirement for documentation should only be evidentiary only? In other words, should be purely to support that the activity took place?
It should be primarily evidentiary, but I'm not saying that that a claim for scientific research tax credit should be excluded if there is no contemporary documentation. There should be. Depends on whether or not the researcher is believed.
Mm-hmm. You are aware that, and I know that you are, the 5 questions that CRA arms RTAs with, they've taken your 5 questions from Northwest Hydraulics and they've made a slight revision to one of them to say that there's a record of the hypothesis kept as the work takes place, which really has put RTAs in a position where, you know, they're now, at least in many cases, basing the decision on whether the work is eligible or not on the documentation rather than looking at the documentation as being evidentiary only.
Well, I would say that the documentation is the strongest evidence that you have in many cases. So try to have it. But I'm not saying that it's essential that I would reject scientific research claims just because there is no documentation. It depends on whether you believe the taxpayer.
Yes, and you're not alone in that. I mean, obviously there's been some very good decisions that have been covered during today's program that does talk about a more balanced view of documentation.
Yeah.